I don't know how many times I've said this, but I will continue to say this. St James's Park is one of the toughest grounds for any team in Europe to go to this season. 30 plus games in all competitions. And Newcastle United are currently in the fourth round of the FA Cup. Currently in a decent opportunity to get inside the top four. And the way City are playing, I would not rule them out to go to the Etihad and overturn that 2-goal deficit. And if they get a positive result against PSG, they'll make the top 8. If they don't, they'll make the qualification process of the Champions League. I think Wissa tonight was absolutely exceptional. Gordon on the score sheet, Barnes on the score sheet, giving Eddie Howe the perfect selection headache. The fact that Voltemada and Wissa right now have both had decent seasons. Bearing in mind, Wissa was out for 3 months of an injury as well, plus AFCON. Look, this Newcastle United team, they've got a tough run coming. Aston Villa at the weekend is not going to be easy, but it's in St James's Park, and I fancy them against anyone at the moment at St James's Park. You know, this season, I think the only games they've lost at home this season have been to Arsenal, Barcelona, Liverpool, and City in the League Cup, which isn't bad whatsoever. When you look at their current position in the Champions League, they're in the top 8 going into the final game. When you look at the Premier League, they're 8th. They're only a couple of points off the top 4. They've got the 6th best home record in the league with 2 defeats in just 11 games. Barnes, again, back amongst the goals. The only downside to their result today is the fact that Bruno G went off just before half-time. Their captain, you know, I've not seen a team love a player as much as Newcastle loves Bruno, but equally it's the other way. You know, people say about how much Saka loves Arsenal, how much, you know, Mohamed Salah loves Liverpool. Bruno G adores those Newcastle fans. You can see how much he tries to give every single game. And not only that, Bruno G this season has been outstanding for Newcastle. He has put an unbelievable shift in this season. What's he got? Double digits for goal contributions. He's got 8 goals and 3 assists just in the league alone. You know, goal and assist against Leeds, goal against Palace, goal against Burnley, decent performance against Wolves. They should have won that game as well. He looks like he's the one at the moment who's happy to take the responsibility of that armband. And what I was really impressed with, Kieran Trippier got the armband after that, and then he gave it to the teenager, Miley. And Miley, for me, you know, very versatile player, has slotted in at right back when Trippier's been out injured, or Livramento's, you know, been kept out of the team because of him. And he's a central midfielder playing at right back. And he's what, 18? I think he's 19. He's 19. So he looks one hell of a talent. Make sure you go down and drop a like on the video if you haven't already. The road to 100,000 subscribers is well and truly on. And as it stands, we're about 475 to be precise away from 88,000. So make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button. And you let me know your thoughts on Newcastle 3, PSV Eindhoven 0. And that is, I believe, 3 home clean sheets in a row for Newcastle. You know, they beat, I think, was it Bilbao before that when Dan Burn got that bullet header? You know, they battered someone. Was it Union St. Gilles they battered away? They beat Benfica as well. I think it was Benfica, Bilbao, and PSV, which makes it 3 home games in a row with clean sheets. And they haven't had it easy. They've played they've played PSG pretty much every year. They've been in the Champions League recently, but they've played Leverkusen, they've played Barcelona, they've played PSG. PSV isn't an easy game either. Benfica, and I look at their run of games they've got coming up before I get into this match reaction, and it's not an easy game. You know, it's not an easy game. The reason I say that I actually fancy them to beat Villa, and I do think they could actually get a result against Villa in the FA Cup, because it would depend on how close the title race is. But I think they beat Villa at the weekend. PSG away, look, that is as tough as it gets. Liverpool away in the league, they're 11 games unbeaten. However, they're not really winning too many games convincingly. A lot of draws in there against Leeds, against Burnley. they will comfortably beat us because at the moment, that Borussia Dortmund game, as great as the win it was, I don't necessarily think that is enough to go off. If we then go out and beat Burnley and then beat Frankfurt, then maybe that will be a completely different game. Brentford, I think they'll beat because it's at St. James's. Pretty much any game at St. James's Park, I fancy them. After the FA Cup game, they've got Man City again, and then they've got Everton, Man United, Chelsea, and then the derby. And then after that, it gets a little bit easier, other than the Arsenal game. But there's a lot of things about this Newcastle United team for them to be positive. Gordon, really good record in the Champions League this season. I think that's his first open play goal in quite some time. Lewis Hall really stepping up now. 2 or 3 really good performances on the bounce. Clean sheet away against Wolves was really, really good for 60, 70 minutes against Manchester City in the League Cup. Botman and Howe. I believe Dan Burns back later this month. Pope, Trippier, Tonali, Joelinton and Bruno G. I've said this many times on this channel and I will keep saying it. That's as good as midfield as you're going to get at the moment. I know Bruno G has gone off injured and missing him against Aston Villa, if it is serious, then it is a big miss, but they could quite easily throw Miley into midfield. I'm not entirely sure. Is Livramento out injured? Yeah, he is. So he's out until March. Wow. There's a Dan Burn is the closest one to being back. Murphy's out till March. Lascelles barely plays. Fabian Schär's out till April. But he's using a lot of his squad. Anyhow, he's maximizing it. Elanga getting a lot of criticism recently. The fact that he hasn't hit the ground running too much in Newcastle. Josie Willock, off the bench. Jacob Ramsey. There's players in there that can cause teams problems. Barnes, again, another goal today. In terms of that PSV team, the only player I really recognize is Ivan Perisic, of course, at Spurs. Legendary Croatian player, part of that Croatian team that made the World Cup. He's won Champions Leagues with Bayern Munich. League title was with Bayern Munich. Very, very, very talented player. In terms of their bench, don't really recognize anyone, to be honest. But Newcastle started the game well. 8 minutes in, making it 1-0. Johan Wissa. And I actually think going forward, he should be the starting number 9. I do like Voltemada, and he does cause teams a bit of he's a completely different player to defend against. Very, very good in the air and very good feet for a big man. But I just feel Wissa, if you can get the Wissa from last year, where he, last year we got 19 league goals. If you can get him up to scratch between now and the end of the season, there's no reason why Newcastle United can't push for a Champions League place. He scores a lot of goals. They took the lead. I don't know what the PSV goalkeeper's doing. Bruno pounces on it, plays it to Joelinton. Joelinton plays it through, and then he kind of scuffs left-footed it into the back of the net. And it's a scruffy finish, but at the end of the day, when you're in that sort of position and you're fighting for every point, it doesn't really matter. And then he then gets an assist 20-odd minutes later, goes down the left-hand side, squares it across to Gordon, and Gordon taps it in to an empty net. And that was a very, very good first half for Newcastle United. And then Lewis Miley come on for Bruno G. A lot of faith that, Eddie Howe's got in him to bring him on for his captain, and then for Trippier to give him the armband towards the end of, the half, which a lot of Newcastle United fans will be very happy about. Such a good, young, talented player that he is. Only 19 years of age, which again, he's a talent that isn't really getting spoken about enough. Academy player, come through their under 18s, come through their under 19s, then under 21s. And it's like, he is a really, really good player. You can see he's got a lot of natural abilities. He's got an engine to get up and down. In the 10 starts he's got in the Premier League this year, he's got 1 goal and 3 assists. He does have an eye for a goal. He can play multiple positions. And then, Newcastle, home and dry, lovely ball through. I believe, was it Tonali? I can't remember who got the assist for the third goal. Lovely ball through. And then Harvey Barnes, who this season has been very, very, very good. 5 goals in the Premier League. I think he's got 4 in the Champions League now. Scored against PSV. He scored 2 against Union St. Gilles. He got an assist against Bilbao. He got a goal against Marseille. And I believe he got 2 goals against Benfica. I think he's in double digits this season for goals. So he'll be really, really happy about that as well. But in terms of Newcastle, in terms of where does that leave them in the Champions League? Well, that currently leaves them inside the top 8. Now, they have got to play PSG next, which isn't going to be an easy game by any stretch, looking at the fact that they have to play, they've got to play PSG away, but they've only conceded 6 goals, which is the second best defense in the Champions League. And that's 3 wins in their last 5 games, 1 draw and 1 defeat. In terms of they're comfortably going to they have made the qualification stage. And they beat PSV, who may not make it because they've got to play Bayern Munich next. But that is a very, very good opening 7 games in the Champions League. To only lose 2, to get 4 wins. Bearing in mind they've played Leverkusen, Marseille, Athletic Bilbao. And in terms of the Premier League, that currently leaves them going into this weekend against Aston Villa, who have to play tomorrow night away in Fenerbahce, away in Turkey. I do actually fancy them to beat Villa. I'm not going to lie. In terms of recent form, it's 3 wins, a draw, and a loss in their last 5 games. Villa have dropped off a little bit, only 2 wins in their last 5. I can actually see a world in which Newcastle go out there and beat them. And if they do, fair play, because after that, their fixtures aren't easy. PSG away in the Champions League, Liverpool away in the Premier League, Man City away in the League Cup, Brentford in the FA Cup, Spurs, then Aston Villa again. But again, a lot of these games are capable of winning when you've got players like Barnes who are scoring goals. And if they can get Wissa up to scratch, I honestly believe they've got a lot in the tank to go. If they turn their goal deficit around against Man City, I would actually back them to win the League Cup, because Eddie Howe's record, he's lost 2 of his last 18 games in this competition, which is very, very good. But let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure you drop a like, and I'll see you next time. I'm out.